Hello everybody and welcome along to a brand new video where today I'm going to be counting down the top 10 or my ranking of all 10 episodes of Doctor Who Series 11. What will be my least favourite, what will be my favourite? Now's the time to find out. So yes, now that we've reached Series 11, it's a good opportunity to do a good old rankings video, rating the episodes from worst to best, going through all the Series 11 episodes. Of course, it is only 10 episodes, so it's kind of a top 10, but there's only 10, so it's kind of not. But yeah, so I thought it's a good opportunity to just kind of, tackle it, and before we get to resolution, I thought I might as well do it before then rather than include the Newsday special, as it is a bit separate to Series 11. So yeah, I hope you guys do let me know in the comments below, guys, your rankings of the 10 episodes of Series 11. See if they are anywhere near mine. Of course, you'll probably all slate me for my opinions, classic. But no, it's fine. But do let me know down in the comments below what your sort of thoughts are and ranking on it are as well. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. But we might as well get started. So coming at number 10, probably not a surprising choice to anybody, is the Suranga Conundrum, the 5th episode of Series 11, written by Chris Chibnall, featuring the mighty Pating. Just really is not a good story at all. There's just not really anything good going for it, I think it has to be said. It's boring, it's bog standard, the villain is a bit rubbish, and it just feels like really quite bad filler, I think is the worst way of putting it, really, because it's just got nothing exciting or interesting about it. It's just so bland, and for the showrunners to be writing that is also extremely disappointing, of course. And yes, it's just not an episode that I would ever really want to go and rewatch. I'd probably watch it in a marathon, but I'm never going to think, oh, I feel like watching the Suranga Conundrum today. It's just not going to happen. So that's why ultimately this has come in at the bottom of my top 10 list. Now next in, and maybe a surprising choice at number 9, is the Battle of Ranskoor av Kolos. Hopefully I'll never have to say that title again, because it is a horrible title. Like, why did Chris think it was a good idea to name it that? Like, something to do with revenge would have made more sense given the actual plot of the episode. The Battle of Ranskoor av Kolos means nothing and is terribly long and clunky. So that's just one of the many problems I have with this story, given that it was meant to be the big epic finale for Series 11, but there is no big epic finale. It's just another episode, which just ends. And the plot isn't particularly amazing. Tim Shaw comes back. Wow. Do we really care that much? And yeah, it just doesn't feel like a finale. It's just not enough. It doesn't feel like it's got the scale of a finale. It's like it's trying to give the scale by we're going to blow up the Earth, but then actually never show anything even hinting at actually blowing up the Earth. Like, it just didn't seem to go there, and so that just left it quite disappointingly. Of course, there was no sort of threads to tie up from the series, which let it down, I think, and made it more difficult to build up a big finale. And yes, because I'm a big sucker for a finale, and so when a finale disappoints, it disappoints big time, and this, I think, was probably the most disappointing finale of Doctor Who, certainly of New Who. And so that's why it comes very, very low on the list. Next in at number 8, we've got The Ghost Monument, the 2nd episode of Series 11. You might be sensing a trend here, given that my first 3 choices have all been written by Mr. Chris Chibnall. And this episode sort of almost isn't bad. It's just a bit uninspiring and bog standard and not necessarily boring. It just doesn't really have anything particularly new or intriguing about it. It's just a fairly basic plot where not that much actually happens, and then the story is over with a story like this. Obviously, you've got those silly little cloth thingies as the villain, which really wasn't the greatest idea that Doctor Who have ever come up with. I think it's fair to say. The visuals do look fantastic in the episode, in particular on this alien planet and everything, and some of those early scenes when we first end up on the alien planet do look very, very impressive. And the idea of a sort of race across space and stuff, and having to race to find this sort of goal so that you can be the survivor, is not a terrible idea. It's a little bit uninspiring, but it's not terrible. But I think it's just that's all it is, really. And very, very predictably, the TARDIS is the Ghost Monument as well. It's nice to get to see that at the end of the episode, so that's quite a nice kind of way to end the story. But in terms of the actual sort of plot of this story, there's not a huge amount going on, and therefore it's a little bit uninspiring, I think is the best way of putting it. So it's one of those that's like, it's not sort of so terrible it's annoying. It's kind of like just not great, and there's just not really much sort of positive things or negative things to say about it. It's just kind of there. You'll watch it in a marathon and not really think about it again. So I think that's a bit of a shame. Again, as it's written by Chris Chibnall, the showrunner, which is even more disappointing, and that's why it comes in quite low at number 8. Next up at number 7 is my first non-Chris Chibnall choice. It's The Witchfinders. And this episode I did enjoy. Going into it, I had no expectations at all. I thought it would be really not my thing, probably a bit rubbish and just genuinely not great. In reality, I did enjoy it a lot more than I was expecting. I think the episode was to a degree carried by Alan Cunningham playing King James. His sort of just kind of almost sort of slightly campy, comedic, entertaining performance would just kind of kept you engaged and kept you enjoying this story, I felt, more so than some of the other aspects of the sort of plot. And so it felt like, yes, to a degree, he was very much making it a sort of more interesting and watchable story. And it was nice to have a kind of sci-fi twist towards the end that there's actually these aliens, the Moraks, who are trying to escape. But other than that, there wasn't sort of a huge amount to make it particularly spectacular or inspiring or exciting. There's enough mystery and intrigue to keep it going. The stuff around sort of hunting witches and sort of pointing out that everybody's a witch and that kind of thing is kind of interesting and isn't explored in Doctor Who very often. But I sort of felt, as an episode overall, it definitely was not terrible, but one of the weaker ones of the series. And certainly in that sort of second half of the series before the finale, this was one of those kind of, less sort of spectacular episodes, shall we say. Next up at number 6 is another Chris Chibnall story. It's Arachnids in the UK. Now this one, of course, radioactive spiders and everything like this. I did not hate it as much as a lot of people did. I know some people have some really scathing opinions of this story and think it's like almost offensive how bad it is. But for me, I genuinely enjoyed this story. I found the character, Chris Snow's character, Robertson, genuinely funny and entertaining and making the story more enjoyable for it. I know, yes, he's meant to be a caricature of Trump, and that's... Yes, I'm not trying to hide that is a fact. But I still found it funny and entertaining and enjoyable, and I think that's what matters. And so, yes, and it was a reasonably sort of... I kind of like the idea that it's actually not any aliens involved, it's just kind of almost a series of accidents with radioactive waste and everything like that that's turned these spiders into absolute giants. And they do look pretty spectacular, given they're like the size of a Roman caravan at times, and at the end of the episode and stuff. It's pretty impressive. And so that sort of all just made for kind of quite an interesting and exciting story. I mean, especially as you're initially trying to work out, is there actually aliens behind this or is it not? What is this radioactive waste thing got to do with anything else? And then throwing in Robertson as well, and them all kind of sort of coming together. Of course, there were too many characters in this story, trying to be main characters, particularly in the second half of the episode when you've got 6 or 7 main characters that you're trying to give dialogue and stuff to do to. It was never going to work. But in terms of, an overall story, I do quite enjoy this episode. It's one that I would probably occasionally go back and watch again, because I don't think it's that bad. And I do think it's got enough kind of entertaining aspects to make it enjoyable, even if towards the end maybe the actual sort of resolution isn't the most brilliant we've ever had in Doctor Who, in that they just shut a load of radioactive spiders in a bunker and hoping they're never going to come out or be found. That kind of seems a little bit... not really solving the problem, but there we go. That's probably the biggest sort of criticism of this story. But yeah, overall, it fits sort of in the mid-range of this sort of top 10, because it's not terrible, but it's also not one of the best. Now, coming in at number 5, we're sort of over halfway through the list now, at The Woman Who Fell to Earth, the Series 11 premiere. And of course does mean that we've hit number 5, and we've already had all 5 of Chris Chibnall's episodes, which kind of says a lot about him as a writer. But for this episode, I did actually quite enjoy. I think it was, maybe there's a little bit more kind of, because it's the first episode, you're more willing to be positive about it. I don't know. Maybe there's an element of that. But it was kind of a well put together story. It did a very good job of introducing all the companions, obviously the new Doctor as well. It felt like a solidly, reasonably strong new Doctor, also Doctor's first story, which was good. And yes, it just kind of zipped along on quite a reasonable pace. Even if at times maybe I feel the episode could have sort of been shortened by 10 minutes or so, possibly, because it was, I think, 65 minutes or so ultimately. But yes, and obviously the introduction of Tim Shaw as well, but I thought those scenes with Tim Shaw on top of the crane and everything were really, really good. They were really well filmed. Showed Jodie properly sort of getting into the role of the Doctor, and then the shock with Grace at the end of the episode that she died was kind of quite a big, probably one of the biggest shocks of the series, let's be honest. Looking back at it now, that probably was the most surprising thing that happened in Series 11. So yeah, so that sort of all kind of combined to make quite a good story, and then obviously the ending as well, leaving it on a nice little cliffhanger, and everything like that. So there was a lot of good elements in this story. It still wasn't kind of amazing. It's not 11th hour level brilliant in terms of a sort of Doctor's first story, but it was very good, and probably I think was Chris Chibnall's sort of best outing in as a writer so far for Doctor Who, because he did very much set up the series very, very well, and sort of made Jodie an instantly sort of interesting and likeable Doctor, also dealing with the whole post-regeneration trauma and everything like that. Some of it was obviously reusing some of the previous things, but it still felt reasonably kind of a good portrayal of the kind of post-regeneration craziness that the Doctor usually gets. And just those scenes like her making her new sonic screwdriver and things like that, they're just kind of just really, really brilliant little scenes that you've got in there that I think, yes, made for a thoroughly enjoyable story. Now, coming in at number 4, which may be to the surprise of some people, is Rosa. I've only put Rosa at number 4, I know, shocking. So yes, this story, of course, the story about Rosa Parks, is sort of not quite a pure historical, but probably the closest we're ever going to get in Doctor Who, in terms of it focusing on the story of Rosa Parks and her sort of not willing to move from the seat on the bus, and the whole sort of controversy that fell out of that, where obviously the Doctor and companions kind of stumble across that by accident and get rather involved in the shenanigans that are going on. And so what I think is quite good about this story is it doesn't beat around the bush with its kind of portrayal of racism and the challenges of that. Obviously having Ryan and Yaz there, who aren't white, makes it a sort of more interesting in that regard, and they didn't just kind of ignore that almost, they like made a point of that, which I think was good. It's important in a story like this to be kind of historically accurate when that's the sort of story you want to tell. And so I thought it was very sort of important and very well done in the story, sort of being able to tackle that particular issue. And then sort of I just thought it was kind of a great idea that you had the Doctor and the companions basically trying to make sure that history stays happening as it's supposed to, when we've got this white racist dude trying to kind of change history to kind of just mess things up because he's racist. And yeah, I feel like we haven't often had that kind of idea of the Doctor and the companions are the ones that had to try and keep history the same. They all need to, like, it's usually like one of the companions wants to change some part of history, but the Doctor's trying to stop them. But actually, no, they all want to keep it the same. They know they have to, and they're trying to stop some other guy. And so I thought that was, yes, a clever idea that's very, very effectively portrayed throughout the story. I think Rosa Parks, the actress, I can't remember the actress playing her, but I thought she did a very, very good job of sort of portraying the character. And it just sort of, yes, created an overall quite a different story for Doctor Who nowadays. Maybe it would have fitted better in the 1960s or something like that people have talked about, the sort of comparisons to the pure historicals of the early years of Doctor Who. But I think for this, so for this era of Doctor Who, it is a little bit, unusual, and I think maybe for some people it didn't quite click for that reason. But for me, I did thoroughly enjoy it as a story. I could very much see the ambition behind it, and it was kind of one of those that I thought Rosa Parks' historical episode doesn't really sound that interesting to me, but actually watching it, I did think it was a really good story. And so we're into the top 3 now. Coming in at number 3, it is Demons of the Punjab. So yes, this episode, obviously the other one, kind of in a similar vein to Rosa in terms of tackling a sort of historical period of history, and obviously ending quite badly for one of the characters as well. The aliens not really being aliens, they're just there to witness people's deaths and things like that. But for me, I found this a kind of a really sort of enjoyable, but also kind of quite beautiful and quite emotional at times, a sort of story in terms of the sort of, obviously the subject matter they were tackling, about sort of the split of India and Pakistan. And obviously it's not, I think the historical element maybe isn't sort of explained quite as much as it is in Rosa. It's not kind of gone to be quite as in-depth study of the history of it. It's more about the particular story of Yaz's gran, and sort of her meeting this man that she's going to marry, and Yaz hasn't got any idea who this guy is. And so kind of, yes, I think that's always an interesting story, kind of exploring the kind of parents or grandparents of some of the companions, because then you get that sort of emotional reaction to it as well. And it's just kind of, I feel like, quite a really heartfelt and sort of heartbreaking tale at the end when he does get shot by his own brother at the end of the story. I think that just kind of was almost quite harrowing for an episode of Doctor Who to do that. And it just really had that feel of a really sort of thoughtful piece of television, an episode of Doctor Who that really sort of put a lot of heart into it to make it as good and as kind of emotive as it could possibly be to fit that sort of type of story. And so I thought just all those elements combined to create what was a really, really enjoyable story, and definitely a story that I would watch. I'd definitely go back to rewatch quite often. I think it is just one of those that really kind of works. And for me, I do prefer it slightly to Rosa, because I know a lot of people have kind of said that Demons of Punjab is not quite a knock-off Rosa, but is kind of a slightly worse version of Rosa. But for me, I think it's slightly better. And so we've only got 2 more episodes left, and coming in at number 2, it is Kerblam. Of course, it's Kerblam. Yes, so in the episode 7 of Doctor Who Series 11, focusing on this sort of package dispatch company, sort of Amazon in the future style company run by robots and everything, and the sort of just plots around that somebody's trying to kind of sabotage the place and putting bombs inside the packages and whatnot and trying to work out what's going on there. It just felt like a proper classic Doctor Who story with a mystery, kind of Doctor and companions going undercover to try and find out what's going on, sort of end up getting a distress call to respond to initially as well. It just kind of had, I felt like, all the elements of a classic Doctor Who story, a story that maybe for the first 10 or 15 minutes was a little bit slow, but then from the middle part it really felt like it got going and you really were kind of constantly kind of finding out new information. They were trying to get involved to try and solve what was going on, and it felt to me like a genuine twist when we found out that it was actually the janitor guy, I can't remember his name, who was the guy behind it all, rather than sort of the shady looking bloke who kind of ran the company, which yes was a nice twist and something I wasn't quite expecting, which I think was really kind of effective in this story. Of course, yes, there's an element of a political message in there. I don't think it's a big thing. For me, it's not a big thing, and I don't think it should be, but I know for some people it is, so I just wanted to acknowledge that. But I do just think it's a really clever idea that as well, that it's the bubble wrap that is the villain, is the sort of the bomb is in bubble wrap, because everybody pops bubble wrap, even by accident you pop bubble wrap. It's such a clever idea that just like wasn't obvious until right at the end of the story why that was what the bombs were going to be. It's just such a sort of great reveal again as well. And so it just kind of felt, yes, as I say, like proper Doctor Who. It had those great kind of shock reveals. Those robots looked really effective as well, and looked kind of just something that really felt like it fitted in Doctor Who as well. This kind of almost felt, I thought, like the kind of most Doctor Who-y episode of the series, I think, almost. Maybe not sort of always the best episode of Doctor Who there's ever been or anything like that, but it really just felt like it was proper Doctor Who, and in an exciting way rather than in a bog standard boring way. So that's why it comes up at number 2 on my list. And so, well, number 1, you should have guessed it already, it is probably quite surprising to some people, please don't kill me, It Takes You Away. Yes, so episode 9, the penultimate episode of series 11, the wacky, bonkers, all over the shop episode of Doctor Who featuring a frog, is my favourite episode of series 11. So you must be thinking I'm absolutely mad, but no, I'm not. I really enjoyed this story. This story, I thought, just kind of felt again like a proper piece of crazy Doctor Who, which I think is very, very important. And it kind of kept on twisting and turning, like we end up in this mysterious Norwegian house, and in the middle of nowhere there's sounds of monsters, then actually no, it's not monsters, because it's some speakers. Why on earth are there some speakers there rather than an actual monster? What on earth is going on? We end up in this anti-zone. What a great concept, by the way, the anti-zone. You could spend an episode in there and make it interesting. That was a fantastic idea. You've got this portal that you go through, which is another great sort of sci-fi concept there as well, to go between universes. And then we end up in a sort of alternative universe, which is another interesting idea to explore there, where and that idea that the two universes can never touch in any way, so you can't have one person of one universe in another, or anything like that, that this universe will always be trapped alone on its own. It also gives the opportunity to bring back other people, therefore bringing the opportunity to bring grace into this, bringing back people from the dead. It's just an episode that's absolutely brimming full of ideas, I think, which is just what makes it so kind of enjoyable. It makes it just skip along at such a rapid pace, because it is just full of new ideas to introduce throughout this story, which are really, really interesting. Of course, there's some lovely sort of emotive moments with Grace and Graham as well in this story, and Graham having to kind of accept that actually this is not Grace and that she's dead, so that he can actually save himself. And the Doctor basically accepting, almost like a sacrifice, accepting that she's going to die to kind of save everybody else, was kind of a brilliant moment for Jodie's Doctor, and I think kind of almost a step forward in her character development to a degree, I think, as her role in the Doctor, and that's the kind of the most significant thing she's done in the part, as the Doctor so far, is that she was willing to sacrifice herself for everybody. I think that's kind of an important sort of moment, I think, yes, for her character. And yes, of course, there is the frog at the end. I personally don't think that's terrible. I think that yes, I know what we all would have loved would have been to see River Song or Susan or Rose or somebody from the past. I know, I would have loved it too, but it fits with how mental this episode is that there's a frog in it at the end, with the voice of Grace. Like, yes, it's crazy, but it fits, I think, within this story, and didn't, like, yes, I was kind of like, what? But it didn't, like, let the episode down for me. It was just kind of like, well, this is a bit strange. That's quite of a random choice sort of thing. But it just, yes, all round kind of combined to make a really, really enjoyable story for me, with a nice kind of conclusion as well, with Ryan finally saying Granda to Graham as well, so a nice kind of completion of that sort of story arc of sort of, well, the character arc of the series there between Ryan and Graham, which I thought was really, really nice. I kind of feel like this maybe even would have worked better as a finale, to be honest. When we forget about Tim Shaw as a character, this almost feels like it would have worked better. It kind of has the stakes almost of a finale, I think, in terms of the kind of Doctor sacrificing herself and trapped in another universe to sacrifice herself and everything like that. Then maybe there would be opportunities to use a different character to a frog for the solo tract at the end of the episode. Maybe that would have been the nice big reveal at the end of the finale or something like that. I don't know. But I just kind of feel that, yeah, maybe this episode would have worked quite nicely as a finale to Series 11. But yes, overall, it is my favourite episode of Doctor Who Series 11. So yes, there we go. I've given my probably absolutely slated opinions, putting It Takes You Away at the top, Rosa not at the top, and episodes, and well, hopefully you'll agree with me that a lot of Chris Chibnall stuff was not so great. But yes, having It Take You Away at the top might be a little bit controversial, I wonder. But do let me know, guys, as I said at the start of this video, down in the comments below, what is your top 10 Doctor Who episodes of Series 11? I'd love to hear what your guys' ranking is down below. What are your opinions compared to mine? What are you sort of hoping for from the New Year's Day special as well? I'd love to hear about that if you've got any thoughts on that. But other than that, that's just about it from this video. Do remember to hit that like button, subscribe if you're new here, and I'll see you again very soon for another video. Goodbye!